And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a Locked On crossover edition. Chris Gordy here from Locked On Big 12 or Locked On SEC, joined by Josh Neighbors of Locked On Big 12. And we got plenty we got to discuss, particularly with our two conferences coming together. Can they make agreements here? We'll get to that in just a second. But this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks is a gift from the heart. A gift that'll be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete confidence today, knowing you're ordering the very best. Visit omahasteaks.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to get that extra $30 off your order. Josh, let's jump into it. As the report came out earlier this week from Brett McMurphy, headline reads, Oklahoma, Texas gaining momentum to leave Big 12 and join the SEC early by 2024. When you saw that, I guess I wasn't very surprised by it. I was like, good, makes sense. But what was your reaction when you saw that?
Yeah, not surprised. The party line from all the folks involved, not shocking, has been, we're here to see out the grant of rights till 2025, and we're all excited to go our separate ways when that does eventually happen. With that in mind, there is an effort to get this thing done, to get it done a bit earlier, which makes a ton of sense, right? Everybody wants to go their separate ways. Everybody wants to be able to go on, to the next thing. So not surprised. And it sounds like the Big 12 and Oklahoma and Texas have been working on this for a while. I think the big pieces now are, can we get all the television partners on board? And it's going to take a little something different from each television partner, if you will, to kind of get on board.
We'll get to that in a little bit, but here's what McMurphy talks about. He said there's a lot of moving parts, but there is the desire on many fronts for this thing to get done and to have the Sooners and Longhorns exit the Big 12 following the 2023 season, which is next year. As we know, the Big 12 is expanding starting next year, and it's going to be very weird and awkward as the brand new wife and family move in, and the ex-wife is still kind of living in the house with Texas and Oklahoma. And, when we talk about Houston and Cincinnati and BYU and UCF, these are four really good programs that are really excited and looking to, really excited about expanding and getting into the Big 12. I mean, I've talked to folks at Houston who, they have talked a little bit about, them getting to have home games and going from home games against Tulsa and ECU to now getting home games against Baylor and Oklahoma State and
Texas Tech.
Yeah, Texas Tech.
Right.
And they're going to get either possibly a home game with Oklahoma or Texas, or maybe have to go out to play one of them. So they're excited about that. But I think most of those teams are look, it's going to be fun for like a 1-year thing, but we don't want these guys hanging around more than that. We want to see them hit the road too. So there's so many dominoes here that have to fall. But just from a standpoint of awkwardness of the Big 12 having all these extra teams next year, it just doesn't seem like, it seems like this is something that really should have, it shouldn't even be happening for 1 year. The transition should have been fluid.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be bizarre to have 1 year of like the new but not new Big 12. Right? I mean, it's going to be OU and Texas, and I think like the running bit everybody has been talking about, because we don't have a schedule yet. We have no conference schedule yet for the Big 12 next year. Is like Oklahoma's trip to Provo. Like I work with a couple Oklahoma guys, and like that's been the running bit. Is like, when's that trip coming? What's going to happen? So yeah, it is the old wife and the kids and the whole divorce analogy, whatever it is. Right, all of that's happening right now. It's going to persist. It's going to continue to happen, is what it sounds like. So I think if it went 2 years, like it would be less weird. The fact that it sounds like it might only be one is really odd. Like we're going to have this 14-team league, and they're going to play it obviously old big, the current Big 12 style where, everybody plays somebody. It used to be everybody plays everybody. Now it's going to be everybody plays somebody and gets in the way. But the sentiment about wanting OU and Texas out is 100% there. Every single time I do a video, I do a show, the sentiment from remaining Big 12 fans, Chris, is get these guys the hell out of here. From Oklahoma and Texas fans, they've all been complaining about the lack of penalties or whatever it is this season. They said, wow, the fix is really in, which, I mean, that's not how this works at all. It's football conspiracy theory in college football, man, it's out there, but like that's not how it went this year. You probably should have played a little bit better. But that's been there. So everybody's kind of waiting for it, but financially it has to make sense. There are contracts that must be honored, commitments that have to be honored. And so we can't just say, let's do it. Let's break up. Let's make the thing happen. There are television partners that must be satisfied in all of this. And so as much as I'm ready to move on, as much as you're probably ready to move on, as much as OU and Texas fans and Kansas State and Oklahoma State and Houston and BYU fans are ready to move on, this stuff has to be sorted out first because of the different timelines of grant of rights and television contracts.
What's so interesting is that, when we talk about the strength of the conferences, I think on the outside looking in, a lot of, folks in the SEC and nationally look at, oh, the Big 12. I mean, it's Oklahoma and Texas. They are the powers. They're these two big forces. And certainly the SEC is ready to take them on. But what's so funny, Josh, is looking back on is this year and last year, neither of those teams even playing the Big 12 conference game, the conference championship. Last year, it was Baylor and Oklahoma State. And then this year, Kansas State and TCU. Neither Oklahoma or Texas was even in that game. And so for the future of the Big 12, it looks strong because, man, look at all our different teams that are coming and going. And we're going to add 4 new teams in here, and it's going to open the playing field. But I saw some people saying, oh, it's going to be awkward if Texas or Oklahoma was playing the Big 12 title game. And I'm going, hey, man, pump the brakes. We don't even know if
it's been right.
2 years.
And it's funny because I thought at the start of the year that's the title game we were going to get. I thought it was going to be OU and Texas. And it's funny that we mentioned this too. So when we got the news from the Sports Business Journal about the Big 12 television deal, what really made Fox want to stay involved was that competitiveness. And look, let's add in the last 3 years. Last 3 years, the Big 12 title game has had 6 different teams in the title game. One of them was OU, yes, back in 2020, but Iowa State has been there. Kansas State, TCU this year, Oklahoma State, and Baylor in the interim. It is that competitiveness. Look, there's no illusion about who the number one conference in America is. It is the SEC. Nobody is debating that. But for the Big 12 to have different schools come up, have them make that rise, have them play in the title game, and for TCU to be in the Big 12 championship, and then honestly, let's spin this thing forward to what a 12-team playoff looks like, Chris, right? Kansas State would be in this year, but TCU would also be in. There's no way they would leave the TCU Horned Frogs out of this thing. This would be one of those years, and I think we have a lot of those years, where there are 2 teams in the Big 12 that would be in the CFP, and 2 very deserving teams. I promise this. Not many teams want to play Kansas State right now. Not at all. I mean, with the way that they look, this isn't like last year's Utah. This is like a incredibly well-rounded, healthy version of the Kansas State Wildcats under Will Howard. So there is that appetite, obviously to have more of that. The teams keep turning over. It's entertaining. There's no Bama. There's no Georgia. But that's what makes this league different and a separate television product, I think, from the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, what some Alabama fans I've talked to are saying, God forbid, Bryce Young and Will Anderson, these guys opt out of the bowl game. They got to go play a hungry Kansas State team. They just don't want to go and watch Jalen Milroe lose to Kansas State and have Kansas State fans beating their chests. We beat Bama.
LSU last year. I mean, LSU had 20 scholarship players in that game, and Kansas State, said, all right, it took them behind the woodshed and whipped their ass. So it was like, and that's what Alabama's facing this year. And that's the thing about these Big 12 teams is they bring a little bit of that underdog mentality, which they should to some extent.
All right, coming up next, we're going to hit on a couple of the factors on why the likelihood of an early move for OU and Texas has increased from Brett McMurphy. We'll touch on that in just a second. But this episode is presented by our friends over at Omaha Steaks. Look, it is that time of year. You be honest with yourself. You probably haven't gotten the gift for your family or friends or who you're looking for yet for Christmas. This is insane. Omaha Steaks has cut their prices 50% site-wide to make you the gift-giving hero that you always wanted to be. The holidays are here. Achieve gifting greatness when you give the gift of perfectly aged, tender, and delicious Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks has put together a delicious selection of various gift packages to make shopping for the ones you love nice and easy. You just go to omahasteaks.com. You take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Plus, use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That'll give you an additional $40 off your order. And Omaha Steaks is everything you need to give a gift that's simply perfect. You can send an assortment of those mouth-watering favorites, from the delicious butcher's cut filet mignon, air-chilled boneless chicken, ultra juicy burgers, and even an easy-to-prepare comfort meal that are ready in a flash. Don't wait. Order today and beat the shipping rush. Go to omahasteaks.com. Use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. It's a gift from the heart, a gift that will be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete confidence, knowing you're ordering the very best. Visit omahasteaks.com. Take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Use our promo code LOCKEDON. That'll get you the extra $40 off your order. Minimum order may be required. Josh, let's get back into it. Reading this piece from Brett McMurphy earlier this week, and a few of the factors, he said, why the likelihood of an early move that for OU and Texas to the SEC has increased. And we'll start here. The Big Ten is going to grow to 16 teams in 2024 with the addition of USC and UCLA. It also happens to coincide with the year that the college football expansion goes to 12 teams. To me, the Big 12, you don't want to be sitting there with those 2 extra teams having added the 4 new teams in 2023. It's just going to take away your chances of likelihood of getting some of your teams a chance to go to the playoff.
Yeah, it's that immediate, because here's the thing. In the immediate, you make money from that, right? But perception-wise, God forbid you send Oklahoma to the playoff in a year before they go to the SEC. And also, Chris, I think that's huge. Think about where the Big Ten is going to be then. Fox, right? That is where they will be. And then at that point in time, obviously, that's when the SEC and ESPN exclusive deal, right? That CBS 3:30 game kicks over to Mickey Mouse and Disney and ESPN and ABC, right? So I think everybody wants to have their full stable ready to go. And I think that kind of war of the 2 top conferences is set to play out in 2024. So it makes sense for why you want the full complement. Is it the end of the world if the SEC doesn't have them by then? But no, it's not. But you kind of want to stack, the 2 power leagues, have all of your ducks in a row, right? Have all the big dogs in the barn ready to go. And so I think that's the number one thing about, and I felt this the entire time too. That's the number one factor if you're the conferences, or if you're the conference in this case, the SEC at least. And then for the Big 12, obviously, let's not send OU or Texas when they might leave the next year. Kind of makes us look weak if we're sending a playoff team elsewhere.
Yeah, and that was one of the other factors that McMurphy put in. He said the Big 12 securing their new media rights deal. This gets very into the weeds on things, but let's talk about it, Josh, because Fox, like you said,
has to be, yeah,
with the rights, they are banking on those Texas-Oklahoma games get ratings. So Fox is not just going to give those up willy-nilly. They're like, no, we're going to enjoy the success of that. Like you mentioned, ESPN, they've got their deal with the SEC. They want to start putting those primetime Saturday night showdowns on ESPN and ABC and capitalize off of that. So in your opinion, what is this going to take? Is this going to take a representative from Fox and a representative from the SEC, Big 12, and ESPN all sitting down and saying, look, let's divvy this up the right way, figure out how to make it work financially where everybody wins?
Yeah, it has to, right? So if you're Fox, think about it this way. I think Brett points this out. Like, what's your incentive to check off on this? What's your incentive to pass OU and Texas along to a competitor? Because you're not in business with the SEC at all. So you're not going to reap any of the benefits. I mean, how do they make their money? They make it off advertising on these games. And look, I'll be honest. I love TCU, love Kansas State, love the story. They did great rating last week on their championship game, was 9.4 million people. But Alabama, Texas was pretty darn well rated, and Texas was part of that. Texas is going to move on. So I understand. OU, Nebraska, same thing. I understand why they want to get their money's worth, right? You have to understand, like, they made this commitment and they are promised Oklahoma and Texas inventory. So what's it going to take for them to be satisfied? I think one idea Brett floated that is possible, and I think the most, not saying most likely, but the most likely to bring back the revenue and kind of even things out is the idea that OU and Texas would schedule non-conference games with Big 12 schools in their first couple of years in the SEC. That makes sense. The problem is open dates, right? Now, we saw in the COVID year, Chris, we can slide things around and make things happen. It's not as hard as we think. But to me, monetarily, that makes sense. If we say, okay, we'll kick, I don't know, UL Monroe, right, for Texas Tech, that might, and we put it on Fox, that might make them okay. They might sign off on that. But once again, if you're Fox, you have to be giving us something in return, because that OU and that the OU Texas inventory there is great. And for the Big 12, I wouldn't sign off on letting OU and Texas leave if it pissed off one of our current and future and hopefully future television partners.
Yeah, I wonder. I would love to have a peek into that bargaining room, and
right.
Maybe maybe the SEC could walk in and go, "Did you guys even watch Oklahoma this year? They were terrible. What are they going to bring to you, Fox? You don't want these guys.
We'll take them off your hands for it. Don't worry about it." Yeah,
I mean, Texas was this was supposed to be one of their years. They still lost 4 games. They didn't even beat Bama. So I don't know what the bargaining is going to look like in those rooms, but man, there's got to be. I saw Brett McMurphy, his piece. He said, are they going to pay the $50 million? Okay, well, maybe it's not the $50 million, but maybe we give you $20 million. Like there's going to be some kind of bargaining and some kind of give or take, because in my opinion, this is just what's best for all parties to part ways rather than wait till 2025.
Yeah, and you have to note here, like the exit for Oklahoma and Texas to leave in 2024, whatever it was, they said roughly around, it's the distribution for like each school or whatever it is, right? So his figure was around 80 million. He says normally it gets negotiated to around 60% of that money. And he said the reason for that is that if the schools wanted to leave and take it to court, there's a chance they could win against the conference, and the conference gets nothing. So normally in an amicable split, you negotiate that number down. So that's something that's there. And part of this too, I mentioned Fox a second ago, like, the Big 12 could say, all right, sorry, Fox, we're going to short you some content here, but we've made enough money from OU and Texas paying us out that we can basically make up the difference, right? So this is, and Chris, you and I'm not sure about your background, not a financial background at all, right? So it's ironic because like the last 5 months I'm Locked On Big 12, we've been talking about money and television deals and pro ratas and adding schools and all that kind of stuff. So doing my best to put, my margin call hat on, and trying to figure this thing out. But it's going to come down to dollars and cents. They don't care about what you and I or the fans think, although everyone, like you said, seems to be on the same page. Let's just get this thing over with, and so we can go our separate ways and start our new futures respectively.
All right, when we come back on this crossover edition of Locked On SEC and Locked On Big 12, we're going to talk scheduling for both conferences. What's it going to look like in 2 years? We'll discuss that in just a second. But this episode is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every pro and amateur league out there. Bowl season is upon us. All the bowl games are up there for you at BetOnline, and they got all the information you need from the, like we said, the bowl season, the college basketball, which is underway, World Cup, all that is up there at betonline.net. They also have podcasts if you like that as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting information. Head on over to their website today. You can do so on your mobile device. You can bookmark it. Should be the first spot you check every day before you go make any betting decisions. It is betonline.net. It is BetOnline, and it is where the game starts. Josh, we know that the scheduling is going to look very different for both conferences here very soon. Let's start with the SEC. We've heard some examples of, a 9-game conference schedule that they want to go to. I do think that is going to happen, go from an 8 to a 9-game conference schedule. Still don't get to play everybody every year, but it is a step forward in playing more teams more often. But we've also heard some talk of a pod system that, SEC may go, you'll play 2 or 3 permanent teams and everybody else will alternate. Now we're hearing a little bit that they may not go that route. They may just keep it to 1 permanent or 2, and that's it, and then rotate and alternate. If Greg Sankey called you and said, Josh, we need a recommendation on how to do SEC scheduling once Texas and Oklahoma get here, what would you tell him?
Well, for folks out there who don't know me on the Locked On SEC side, I am a SEC alum. I went to the University of Missouri, and so they were there the entire time I was there. Obviously in the SEC, so I would like to see the pods, but like just know that they're not pod. They're not like it's not a pod you're fixed into, and it's not standings. It's just look, these are teams you're going to play every year, right? And so I would love to see my Missouri Tigers play Oklahoma. I want to see them play Texas. I want to see them play Arkansas, right? I want to see them play those regional teams and kind of vice versa, right? Those teams that make sense to them play. Now, obviously, Texas, they need to play Texas A&M every single year, so there is some difficulty with that. But I think there's two ways to go: go pod system or just go the down the line, down the list, no divisions, right? And just rotate the schedule as much as you can. And look, I'm not a genius. I can't tell you what that looks like, but I think, Chris, I have to flip it back to you. Which direction are you feeling? Because I just think keep two permanents and then line them up and knock them down kind of is the right way to go to cycle through this thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I was kind of on board with the 3 teams and doing the pods, but I think 2 makes the most sense because you
Right.
don't want to lose the Iron Bowl. You want to keep Bama, Auburn. Georgia, Auburn, I feel like you need to keep as well.
Poor Auburn has to keep those 2, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough draw. Tennessee wants to keep their rivalry with Alabama, so that's one that would have to stay. You have the intercrossings of LSU, Arkansas has been a little bit of a rivalry. They've had the rivalry with Florida, but I think that one would have to go away because just too difficult to make it work. So I think we'll be done with what we know is the SEC East and the SEC West. I think you'll just say everybody will play everybody and we'll alternate every other year. So I think that's the best way to go. There's no right way to do this, but I do know that the passion and the traditions and the rivalries of the SEC, they want to keep those going. Everybody knows, the Georgia Auburn rivalry and the Iron Bowl and all these other great rivalries. I think that they want to keep those intact. So yeah, I think two would make most sense. And
if you explore it too, I mean,
every year too.
And if you explore, like, there are kind of 2 rivals for every team, right? Auburn's got the 2. LSU, I guess you'd play A&M, and then, I mean, you're an LSU guy. Who the second team?
Arkansas, maybe Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, right? And then Ole Miss, Mississippi State would keep their Egg Bowl. Then you'd find somebody else, obviously, to fit in. Missouri, maybe you do the Governor's Cup with Columbia, South Carolina, then you do the battle line with Arkansas, right? OU keeps Texas, OU adds somebody else, Texas does A&M, and then, so I think there are enough rivalries kind of built in. They could make that 2, you keep 2, flip everything else around thing work. And, even if you miss somebody, you won't miss them for that long. You know what I mean? I mean, you're eventually going to play them again. Now, get them at home, get them away, sure, but you'll get them back soon.
Let's get into it with the Big 12. How will the scheduling look like with the Big 12 in their expansion? Because as it sits right now, you're going to add more teams. And again, once again, you're not going to be able to play everybody. So what's the Big 12 thinking as early as next year with the addition of 4 teams and still having to accommodate Texas and Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think the plan for the Big 12 is just keep my dog's yelling right now. He loves the scheduling conversation. So I would just keep I would keep things rolling, right? I think the one benefit the Big 12 had this year is that TCU, their one kind of trump card was they played everybody, right? And so I think that idea, that framework works. It's going to create more interesting matchups time in, time out. And also if you miss somebody, hey, I wish I would have saw Team X play Team Y. Well, if they were both good enough and you thought Team X needed the challenge of Team Y, they'll probably see each other in Arlington, right? That's the challenge they had to have. So I think they're going to keep the same schedule. They've already said bye-bye divisions. The one true champion thing didn't work when there was no conference championship game. So I think the Big 12 kind of inadvertently got ahead of the curve, right? I mean, they were, for a myriad of reasons, right, going down to 10 teams, forced them to go to play everybody. And then also the one true champion thing screwed them. So they had to go to play a conference title game. So they kind of organically worked it out amongst themselves. And I think the Big 12 is in a good spot.
And as good as the SEC, as fun as it's been East versus West and all that, it would make more sense for an SEC championship to be the two teams with the two best records in the SEC will play each other, right?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes it'll probably end up being, Alabama and Georgia, right? I think the one kind of benefit, like, it's been so funny because all of these, the Big Ten is the best example. I mean, it's just like Ohio State or Michigan against whoever the hell wants to show up next week, and whoever else wants to sort it out on that Big Ten West side. The nice thing about the SEC is that the SEC West winner always feels very deserving, and Georgia recently has been clowning everybody. So it's kind of worked out organically to right where you want it to be. And I think the SEC is they've gotten lucky with that, but you probably want to go away from it and just be like, all right, everybody plays everybody. And if you play most everybody, I think organically we'll find out who the two best teams in that conference are.
All right, before we wrap things up, Josh, college football playoff will be upon us very soon. Give me your predictions. How do you see this playing out?
So Georgia, Ohio State, interesting. I'll take Georgia in that game. I think I'll go that direction. Michigan, TCU is also somewhat interesting, but you love Michigan's offensive and defensive line compared to TCU's. And as much as I love my guy Max Duggan, Heisman finalist, finished number 2, I think it's going to end up being Michigan. And Georgia's just a better version of Michigan, right? We saw it last year, and those teams have not. If you feel differently, Chris, correct me here, but those teams haven't drastically changed their identities in the last calendar year. So I still feel like Georgia is a better version of Michigan. So I'll take Georgia over them. But I'll tell you this, I think these matchups this year, because of the amount of talent that we see on the side of Ohio State, right, especially at wide receiver, and maybe some deficiencies in that back end for Georgia, I think that game is more interesting than we've had in the past in some semifinals. And I think TCU, because of their penchant for playing close games, has a very good chance of pressing Michigan. So I like the fact that we might see two interesting matchups. Hey, we might not, but guess what? We usually don't anyway. So I think we have a better chance of seeing two good matchups. What about you? Can you make predictions?
I'm with you. I think it's Georgia, Michigan in the title game. But I will say, man, I thought second half of the SEC championship game, LSU was torching that Georgia secondary like nobody has done in the past 2 years, other than Alabama in the SEC title game a year ago. So I will say, caution Georgia. I know Kirby's probably showing all that film to his team, but CJ Stroud might be licking his lips for Ohio State, going, "Hey man, let's go win a shootout with Georgia. Let's the last team with the ball wins." And look, if we get an Ohio State Michigan game in the championship, the ratings will be through the roof. Everybody's going to tune into that, and it's a great rivalry. But man, you have a lot of angry people from SEC country and Big 12 country going, "Not my championship. I didn't vote for this. Can we please expand now? Can the expansion start now? Can we go to 12 teams immediately?" Because nobody in the South wants to see that one. But no, I think Georgia has been so good. I can't see it coming to an end against an Ohio State team that has, let's face it, did not live up to expectations largely throughout this year.
Very true, yeah. But I would say more so this year than other years, on paper, the matchups in the semifinal are a bit more compelling than normal.
They definitely are. He is Josh Neighbors, host of Locked On Big 12. I'm Chris Gordy, host of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen. Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available in the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This has been a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and Locked On Big 12.